Alrighty. All right. Okay, so we're opening this discussion and learning about tefillin, which is a monumental mitzvah. And the idea is to say that um, whenever we're learning about any mitzvah, what is the process? Because there's one thing to say, like, okay, I know it's a mitzvah, and I know that it's something I should do. It says it in the Torah, and and I got to do it, right? So doing the mitzvah is one thing, and then another thing is about learning the mitzvah, right? Because the learning of the mitzvahs make sure that we're not in a place of idol worship, right? Where we're doing things just because people do it and not really knowing why God wants us to do it in a way is not knowing that God wants us to do it in a way. I mean, there is a simple level, which is just doing the mitzvah, not really knowing anything about it. But it's a very dangerous area. You know what I mean? It's a very dangerous area, right? Because if you don't know anything about it, you're not clear on what's going on or what it's about. A person could fall into, just mundaneness and doing it because they really don't know why they do it. They just do it, and that's a very dangerous place to be at, right? And so we want to make sure we're not in that dangerous place. So the tradition that I was taught in yeshiva was basically, you learn something out. So what does it mean to learn something out? First level, it, assuming we're talking about Torahs that mitzvahs that are explicitly written in the Torah, like tefillin, we want to learn about it, right? We want to first learn, what it says in what it says in the Torah itself, 5 books of Moses, and then we want to learn, Mishnayot, and then we want to learn the discussions around the Mishnayot, and then we want to learn the reflections on the discussions of the Mishnayot by the later generations, right? So you have the Mishnah, which is the Gemara. I mean, well, you have the Mishnah, which is the Tanaim, right? And these are the people that basically, they compiled what was oral into, written. And that's the Mishnayot. Now, to understand it, unpack it, because it was written in cryptic ways, is that you have the Gemara, right? So the Gemara comes and it has a discussion around the Mishnah, right? And comes to certain conclusions on what means or whatnot. And you have a generation after them, which is the Rishonim, made famous by Rashi and Tosfos, and they go off of the discussions of the Gemara, and it sets up a process for us to be clear, in other manuscripts on the halacha itself, right? So it's not just enough to know what the halakha is, but to understand how it started from the Torah and then how it built into something physical that we are able to function in the case of tefillin. So, anyways, and before we get going, do you have any questions or anything you want to ask? Anything like this?
No, 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 not at the moment. Baruch Hashem.
Mm,
I'm just here to learn.
all right, beautiful. All right, and I would say that in this type of a study, what's more important is not the content, but rather the structure, right? So we're going to start with the Mishnah. We're going to start with the Mishnah Torah, and the Mishnah Torah has a section that um, deals with tefillin, it deals with mezuzah, and it deals with Torah scroll, right? So the first part is tefillin, and so Mishnah Torah is a great way to start in learning anywhere with Rambam because he pretty much just goes through everything. You know what I mean? Like he's pretty clear. He goes through the whole thing, and it creates a sense of like safety of like what's going on, right? Because right now we're trying to understand what's going on to fill in what's going on, right? And so we want to understand what's going on. So starting with Rambam is the most comprehensive way, unless you're, learning with people, you're in a learning institution, you're like doing what we're doing, you could maybe focus on other areas. But if you're just trying to get a broad understanding yourself, you could read the Mishnah Torah. All right. It's pretty straightforward. Hold on 1 second. And as we go, we'll discuss. What does it mean to learn something, right? Like if I want to learn a particular topic in the Torah, a particular halacha or anything, what does it mean to learn it? So we're gonna figure that out. But this just starts here. So it says Arba parashiot elu. So so he starts off. This is the Rambam. He's starting with Tefillin. This is the first thing he says. There's 4 passages of the Torah. Uh, he says Kadishli, right? He said there's 4 passages in the Torah, right? So we're going to see what these 4 passages are. So, but these are the 4 passages. So he says Kadesh Li. That's one passage. It's in Shemot Gimel Yud Gimel. Okay, so it's in Shemot. Oh wait, sorry. The first one's in Shemot Yud Gimel Aleph, and the second one is and that's what we just read. The second one is Vehaya ki avi echa Shei Basefer Ve Elohe Shemot. All right, so this one is in there's 2 parshas, there's two passages, both are from Shemot, and the third one is Shema, which is in Devarim, and then there's another one in Devarim Vehaya im Shemea Shemoah, right? All right, so these are the passages. So you have Kadishli and Vayahi, he says, are from the book of Exodus, like I just said, and then you have Shema and Vehaya. Shema is in Devarim, it's just Shema, and should be written separately. Okay, he says, and should be written separately and cover with leather. They are called tefillin. They are placed on their head and they're tied on the arm. According to Torah law, even a mere point of one of the letters from these 4 passages prevents all of them from being acceptable. All 4 must be written in proper order. So you have your tefillin, and it's a box, right, for the arm and in the head. And what he's saying here, inside of that box, it's written, and you're going to see more. It's written 4 passages, right? Why these 4 passages are chosen? This is something maybe he'll let us know. But there's 4 passages from the Torah written on the 4 sides. Vekin shetem perish yeah parshiot sheba mazu za. Okay, so he says, okay, so the parshiot in the mezuzah she'in shema. So he says, similarly, if one letter of the 2 passages contain in the mezuzah shema and ve'ahi uh, is lacking a point, it is not acceptable according to Torah law, which requires each of them to be written in a perfect manner. Similarly, the Torah scroll, which is lacking even one letter, is unacceptable. So all the letters of the passages have to be in written clearly on it in the same way as it is for the tefillin, also by the mezuzah. He says, Asra Hadavari Yeshta Beiti Betefilin Kulan Halacha Le Moshe. Okay, Sinai. So he says there are 10 requirements for tefillin. All of them are halakot transmitted to Moses on Mount Sinai. It is necessary to fulfill them all. Therefore, if one made any changes with regards to them, the tefillin is not fit for use. 2 of them involve their composition, and 8 involve the covering, the placing around the passages, and the tying of the straps. There are two that there are 2 that are involved in the composition. They must be written in the ink, and they must be written on parchment. So the tefillin itself, inside of it, it has to have parchment, and it has to be written with ink. He says, Kesad Maaseh. Hadayona Mikabetzina Be'asan Shela Manim. Sorry, Shel Shamanim. All right. So he says, how is the ink prepared? One collects the vapor of oil, tar, or wax, or the like, cause it to condense, and knead it together with sap from a tree and a drop of honey. It is moistened extensively, crushed until it forms into a flat cake, dries, and then stored. When one desires to write with it, one soaks the cakes of ink in a gallnut juice or the like, and to write with it. Thus one mu- so thus if one attempts to rub it out, he would be able to. This is the ink with which is it is most preferable to write the scrolls, tefillin, and mezuzos. If, however, one wrote any of the three with gallnut juice or vitriol, which remains without being rubbed out, it is acceptable. Okay, so he just went over the process. So we understand that the scroll, the mezuzah, the all of them are connected. So that's a key point, right? So we have to make a connection between the tefillin, the mezuzah on the door, and the Torah scroll, right? And how they have to be done a certain way, and if they're missing anything, they are invalid. So if one letter is missing from the tefillin, it's invalid. If a letter is missing from the mezuzah, it's invalid. The same thing. And so they're going over the ink, right, and the process of the ink and how the ink is made. Inken ma ma sorry mi atada behalacha ha ne'amar le Moshe har Sinai shehi sheyi vu ketuvim bedayon. All right. So he says, if so, was it excluded by the halakha conveyed to Moses on Mount Sinai, which stated it should be written in ink? It okay. So wow. He said, if so, was it excluded by the halakha conveyed to Moshe on Mount Sinai, which stated that it be written in ink? It excludes tints of other colors, which are red, green, and the like. Even if one letter of the Torah scroll or tefillin is in another tint or in gold, it is invalid. So the reason why they're saying that they settled on ink specifically, saying like, does it specifically say ink? No. He's saying, but they do exclude specific other colors that make it invalid. Shalosh orot hin. There's three types of parchments. It says Gevil, it says Kulaf, and Veditum. He says, all right, so there's three types of parchments. So I see the dynamic, so you should be visualizing what's in it, right? What's in it, what makes it tefillin, right? And that's what we're understanding right now. What makes it tefillin, right? Because every mitzvah has to be exact. There's three types of parchments: Givul, Kulaf, and Di Kusuf Satun. All right, fine. So he says, what is implied here? The hide of a domestic or wild animal is taken. First, the hair is removed from it. Afterward, it is salted and prepared with flour, then resin in another substance which causes the skin to contract and become harder are applied to it. In this state, it is called givul. All right. So these are one the the givul is that's what it is. Ve'im lekachul or acher de shehavarihu de she'aron. So he says, after the hair is removed and the hide may be taken and divided in half in the manner known to the parchment procedures. Thus, there are two pieces of parchment, a thin one which is on the side where hair grew, and the thicker one where the side of the flesh. After it has been processed using salt, then the flour, then resend and the like. The portion on the side where the hair grew is called caliph, and the portion on the side of the flesh is called. It's easy for me to say it in Hebrew. Um, do ke sa susatun susatun. I don't know. This is wild. All right, so he's explaining it. He's explaining this is what's going on. This is what you're wrapping on yourself. Halak le Moshe Sinai Shehe Vul ko tivin the Sefer Torah al ha givil ko. Okay, so he says the halakha transmitted on Mount Sinai that a Torah scroll should be written on Givul, the side on which the hair has grown. When the Tefillin was written on Kilaf, they should be written on the side of the flesh. When a mezuzah is written on a on the du suf satun, it should be written on the side of the hair. These are very specific things, but this is how it's made. We got to know. He says never. He says whenever one writes on the kilaf side of the hair, or on the givul, or on the diskusufatun, he says on the side of the flesh is unacceptable. So again, these are like things you got to be very specific about. But he's talking about some sides of the flesh where we can write on the parchment, and other sides that we can't. He says, Afal pi shecha, he says, Ahiya chalaka le Moshe Sinaim ketiv sefer Torah ala hakalaf kasher. So he says, never, he says, although it is halakha, which was transmitted to Moses on Mount Sinai, if one wrote the Torah scroll on kalaf, it is acceptable. Galaf is mentioned only to the exclusion of Sufu Tun. He says, if the Torah scroll was written on the latter, it is not acceptable. Again, we have to go over these specific points, but we get an idea. Similarly, if the mezuzah was written on the kalaf or on the gilav, it is acceptable. The disku the dikhu suf satun, he says it was mentioned only on mezuzah. So there's certain parts are acceptable for mezuzah, certain parts are acceptable for the Torah scroll, and certain parts are acceptable for tefillin. Ine kot vima sefarima tehilima umezudot al gabe or behema ta'ema off. Okay. So he says the Torah scrolls, tefillin, mezuzah may not be written on hide of a non-kosher animal, fowl or wild animal. So it has to be written on a kosher animal. It's a big deal, no? While one must write on the hide of all kosher animals, wild beasts and fowl, this applies even when these animals die without using ritual slaughtering, or when they are killed by wild beasts. So even the animal has to be killed in a kosher way. It may not it may not write on the skin of a kosher fish because of the foul uh, secretions, since the processing of the skin will cause the foul secretions to cease. Not exactly. I mean, I understand what he's saying, but he's saying like basically we can't use fish. And there's reason why. He says, Gazil Shea Sefer Torah Ule Kalef Shel Tehilim or Shel Sefer Torah Sirik Le Aved, yeah, Le Abed Otan Le sorry, Lisman. The Gavir of the Gazir of the Torah scroll, and the Caliph of the Tefillin, and to feel and for the Torah scroll must be processed with the same process in mind. If they are not processed with the intent that they are not acceptable. So they have to have the kavana that is being used for this. Accordingly, if they are processed by a Gentile, they're not acceptable. So non-Jew cannot make these things. Even if a Jew instructs a Gentile to the process the parchment with the intent that be used for a Torah scroll or tefillin, it is not acceptable. So the physical touching of a Gentile and making this makes it unacceptable. The Gentile follows his own intentions and not of those of the person who hires him. So he's saying non-Jews don't have the same mind as we do. Therefore, whenever an article must be made with a specific intent in mind, it is unacceptable for it to be made by a Gentile. The parchment used for a mezuzah not need be processed with this in mind. The parchment for the mezuzah not need to have the process of this in mind. So that's an interesting point, right? So the making of the parchment, he doesn't necessarily have to have that in mind. He just has to separate the hair. Halak le Moshe Sinai she'in ke tefillin sefer Torah velo mezuzah ve'ela. So he says in the
See
halakha.
what about-
Yeah,
One question. So, do you think that that means that the parchment can be purchased from a facility that is not that's Gentile owned?
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The parchment itself, it doesn't have to have intention, right? But once you take the parchment and you start to facilitate it for the tefillin itself, then it has to have intention. And they're saying only a Jew could have true intention of doing the parchment for the tefillin.
All right. Toda.
So he says halak Moshe Sinai She'in. Okay, so he said the halakha transmitted to Moshe on Mount Sinai is that the Torah scroll or the mezuzah should be written only on parchment, which has been ruled. Parchment used for tefillin, however, need not be ruled, but they are covered. He says it is permissible to write tefillin and mezuzah without looking at it. In an extent, in um, um, an extent text because everyone is familiar with the passages. This is, however, forbidden to write even one letter of a Torah scroll without looking at it as, I mean, as an existent text. Existent text. Sorry, I didn't say it right. Anyways, anyways, so he's saying that because you're only writing a few parshiot, you could write it and not even necessarily be looking exactly at the text, like I mean, like staring at it, like you could write it and be looking. I don't know. I mean, that's what this sounds like. All right, but anyway, the point is, at this point, we're not making tefillin, but we're getting an idea how tefillin are made, right? So he
So,
says, "Safe." Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
so on that last point, it looks like what it's saying is like when it comes to tefillin and mezuzah, because these verses, these paragraphs are everyone, majority of the people know them, and you can look at it and say, "Oh no, that's not right and that's not wrong." But when it comes to the Torah scroll, if you're writing a Torah scroll, you have to be looking at another Torah scroll in order to copy the work, to transcribe it.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
exactly, exactly,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. I understand.
Exactly. Okay. It's interesting too. I have a friend of mine who I went to yeshiva with. He's actually making me a pair of tefillin right now. Like he's like, he's doing specific stuff to it, whatever. We'll see how it works out. So it says Sefer Torah Tehillim and Mezuzot. So he says a Torah scroll, a Torah scroll, a tefillin and mezuzot written by an apicorus should be burned. This is a Jew who does not believe in God. He said it should be burned. That's crazy, right? He says they are written by. He says if they're written by a Gentile or an apostate Jew, a person who betrayed the Jews to a powerful person, a slave, a woman, or a minor, they are not acceptable to be entombed, as implied in Deuteronomy. You shall tie you shall tie and you shall write. Our sages explain that this includes only those who are commanded to tie tefillin on their arm, and those who believe in what they write. Scarce articles, which are found in the possession of an abicorus, and it is not known who wrote them should be embalmed. I don't know what that means. Those who found in the possession of a Gentile are kosher. We should not. So it's interesting. He says if you find I guess tefillin with a person who is a non-believer, you know, and it's not known who wrote them, you know, they should be like just thrown away. But those who are found in the possession of a Gentile are kosher. We should not. It's interesting, right? So we trust a non-Jew more than we trust a Jew that went away. In this regard, she says, and we should not, however, purchase Torah scrolls, tefillin, or mezuzot from Gentiles for more than they are worth, and so that they do not become accustomed to stealing them. That's crazy. So he says Sefer Torah Tehillim. So he says the Torah scrolls Tehillim that are written on parchment from a non-kosher animal, beast, or parchment that was not processed properly is not acceptable. Similarly, a Torah scroll Tefillin that was written on parchment that was not processed with the intent for these scarce purposes is not acceptable. Hako Achotev Sefer Torah. She's a person who writes a Sefer Torah or a mezuzah without the proper intention. Should should he write one of God's names without the desired intent are not acceptable. Therefore, when a person is writing God's name, he should not rely even if a king is the king of Israel greets him. If he is writing two or three names, he may interrupt them. He may be interrupted between them and reply. Ha tovel ed ha kalimos lekatuv ed Hashem elo. He says when a scribe dips his ink when he dips his pen in the ink and writes God's name, he should begin writing one of the letters of God's name. Rather, he should not begin writing one of God's letters names. Rather, he should begin with the letter preceding God's name. If a scribe forgot to write God's name in its entirety, he may insert it in between the lines. It is, however, unacceptable to have a portion of God's name on the line and in a desired inserted between the lines with regards to one another words. If one forgets and writes half of the word on the line and half on above line, then what he says, what does this apply? With regards to the Torah scroll, in contrast to Tefillin Mezuzah, one should not insert even one letter between the lines. Rather, if one forgets even one letter, he should entomb what was written and write another one. And it is permitted to write God's name on parchment where letters have been scraped off or rubbed off on of these scared articles. All right, so he's going to different. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, when it says entombed, I remember I guess about a
Like,
year or so ago, I was looking at this. I don't know if it's in Australia, but they have a community there that of scribes, and what they do is people send them there to tefillin and they repair them, right? But if the tefillin is unrepairable, they actually gather um, all these tefillin and all of these Torah scrolls, things that can't be repaired, and they excavate and they bury them. Is that what that means? Like when they entomb them?
yeah, exactly. It's a certain
Okay.
way, and we'll get into that, like how to deal with these
Okay.
things. But yeah, but this right now, he's saying that, but it's an important point. What does that mean? It says, Ko Tevi Ha Sefrim Tehillim. It says, one who writes the Torah scrolls Tehillim and a mezuzah must not turn the parchments face down. Rather, he should spread a cloth over them or to fold them. Again, that's a very particular point. He said the following. He says Sefer Torah Tehillim and Mizvot She Amar should say Ha Sofer Acher. He says the following rules applies. A scribe who wrote the Torah, who wrote Torah scroll, mezuzah, Tefillin mezuzah states, I did not write into the name of God with proper intention. Once they had left, once they left his hand, his statements are not believed with regards of the disqualification of the scroll. They are, however, accepted to the extent that they must for forfeit his entire wage. Why isn't it believed in regards to the disqualification of Torah scroll? So he's saying, like, if someone, when it comes to Torah scroll, if someone says that, like, hey, I didn't have proper intention, this, blah, 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 it doesn't forfeit the entire Torah scroll, but it does forfeit him to make money. Because it is possible that he wanted to cause a loss to the purchaser or to the person who hired him, thinking that this statement, all that he would require to forfeit would be a payment for the God's name. Accordingly, we say that the parchment of the Torah scroll of Tefillin is not processed properly, intent in mind, his statements are accepted with regards to disqualification of the scarce articles, because by virtue of the statement, he forfeits the entire wage. And everyone knows that if the parchments were not processed with the intent, proper intent, he does not deserve payment. So you hear the difference. So when it comes to a Torah scroll, if someone writes a Torah scroll and say, "Hey, you know what? I didn't have the right intentions and all the names that I wrote. I was thinking about, Super Bowl, NBA Finals or whatever," then it's like, oh, okay, well, okay, then we got it, right? But if a person says the same thing, but we don't accept that, right? Because we assume maybe there's another agenda involved, because this Torah scroll is pretty like extensive. But when it comes to tefillin or mezuzah, and they say such a thing that they didn't have right intention, that we disqualified and he doesn't get paid. She'in ko tehillim. Ko tivim tehillim mezuzot. Tehillim mezuzot may be written only in a Assyrian script. Permission permission was granted to write the Torah scrolls in Greek as well. That Greek language has, however, been forgotten from the world, and it has been confused and sunk into oblivion. Therefore, at present, all three scared articles may be written using Assyrian script alone. It's interesting why they allow Greek. One may be precise while writing them, making sure that one letter does not become attached to another, because any letter which does not surrounded by parchment on all four corners and is unacceptable. So that's an interesting point. So the letters themselves have to be surrounded by parchment. And again, when we learn the Kabbalah behind these things, it'll make even more sense. Any letter that cannot be read by a child who is neither wise or foolish is not acceptable. Therefore, one must be careful with regards to the form of letters so that the yud will not resemble a vav, and nor the vav resemble a yud, and the kaf should not resemble a bet, or the bet should not resemble a kaf, or a dalet should not resemble a resh, or resh should not resemble a dalet. Makes pretty sense, right? Straightforward. So he says the same applies in other similar instances. The text must be written in a manner that a reader will be able to read without difficulty. Or shehaya nakuv lo yikatov al gabe hanekav. Okay. He says the following rule applies parchment which has holes. One should not write over a hole. If, however, ink passes over a hole without seeping through, the presence of the hole is of no consensus. And one who writes upon it accurately, if the of a fowl has been processed, it is permissible to write upon it. The following rule applies when parchment becomes uh, perforated, I guess, perforated after it has been written on one. The perforation of is within inside of the letters, and the spaces inside he, inside amen, or inside the other letters, it is acceptable. All right, so he's going through the details of the actual writing on the parchment and the sequence of the letters. Very detailed stuff, right? Despite the fact that the leg of the letter becomes perf- perf- perforated to the extent perforated to the extent that it becomes separated into two portions is acceptable. A, the length of the leg is equivalent to the small letter, and the letter B, the letter's present form does not resemble any other letter. If the length of the leg is not equivalent to that of the small letter, it's not acceptable. Okay. So we'll stop here. We'll continue on tomorrow. But okay, so any thoughts, reflection? I know we just got hit with a bunch of details, but part of learning what something is to know what it is. You know what I mean? And so we went through this process of at least the first chapter with Rambam of dealing with this, and I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from this chapter is seeing the relationship between tefillin, mezuzah, and Torah scroll, right? And seeing that they all have parchment, they all are written with black ink, but there's different variations on how they relate to the parchment and how they relate to the words and how they relate to the letters, but nevertheless they're all connected. Anyways, any thoughts, reflections on this?
Yeah, Baruch Hashem. What this does is just how meticulous this is. The process of producing tefillin is deeper than just a company coming out saying, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna mass produce something," but rather this gives me a deeper understanding of that this tefillin was made with the right intentions. It was made with the right materials. The parchment was written correctly, and sometimes like when you go into a store and you get a packaged item, and it says you check the hex on and it has a kosher label on it. You're like, okay, great, you put it in the basket, right? And I think a lot of times we take for granted just how meticulous that process is in order to get that texture. But this is like above normal. This is even above that. To whereas you understand the true value of what you're doing and what you acquired, and it's very very holy, very sacred. Toda.
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. And as we go further into it, we're going to go through all the details of what makes it. And as we go further, we're going to learn the Kabbalah behind that. Why those things are important. Why does it have to be written this way? What does the parchment mean? What does the black letters mean? Why does the Shem have to be specific? That can be written in these other colors, right? Why is the box the way that it is? What does it mean to be on, uh, um, what does it mean to read these things? So, anyways, we'll continue on. But the thing is, this is about building a relationship, right? So the thing is the depth of learning is saying that when you pick it up, you understand it, right? How many marriages will be much more successful if the guy understood his wife the same way we're going to learn the tefillin, right? So, all right, so we'll continue on tomorrow, probably around the same time, maybe earlier, maybe later. We'll figure it out. But you let me know what your schedule when you're the most free. So I'm assuming it's around now. So probably around this time. But we'll continue on, and we're going to go through it. We're going to learn all the Rambam, and then we're going to figure out then we'll go into the specific halacha that's generally applies to it, and and you'll be